Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns and Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. And with me today is Sam West. We are going to be talking about the spell Aid. All right, Sam, I'm going to come out of the gate. I like this one. And, I've been talking with you enough to know that I have to consider spells not just at the level you get them, but at higher levels as well. This one, I have considered it. I think it's a good spell for the level you get it, but I think it probably has diminishing returns at higher levels. What do you think?
8 is odd. In that particular context, I actually disagree with you. Ooh. I think when you initially get Aid, it is mediocre. It's fine. It is castable. I think it peaks at a very odd point in the game. I think if you're getting 15-ish hit points out of this, that's when I'm like most happy with it. When this is being cast as like a 4th or 5th level spell slot, that's where I think you're getting on large numbers of creatures. If you're doing this on like 5 creatures, you're pretty happy. I'm sorry, if you're doing this on 3 creatures, you're happy to be happy because it's just 3. I think that's a decent pool of hit points for the spell level. You're getting, again, if you're like 15 casting it as a 5th level spell or as a 4th level spell, you're getting for a 4th level spell 45 hit points. That's not awful. It's in 3 instances of 15, which is different, but I don't think it gets much better than that. I think every subsequent one is definitely diminishing returns, especially as things are getting to do damage that is outscaling 5 interval every spell level. It's complicated.
Right. I haven't thought about that way. I was just thinking when you get it, what is a 2nd level spell?
As a 2nd level spell.
So, yeah, I was thinking the ratio of additional hit points to your current hit points. I wasn't looking much past that.
Sure. So it's weird. A lot of the D&D scaling is skewed because so much of it boils around 2 main factors: number of monster attacks and dice size. Because most of the time, the most damage a weapon is doing, especially in most like low tier monsters, things that you're going to be commonly fighting throughout the whole course of the game. You'll just fight more of them or in different, more dangerous environments. You're looking at things that are dealing groupings of 2 or 1 dice. So 2d8 plus 3, 2d10. You'll even get to like 2d12s multi-attack, 2d8s, 3 multi-attack. That's where the weird scalings come in. And you're going to get more instances of multiple attacks at higher tiers and more instances of high damage at higher tiers, but not necessarily. The spell then, it is important for eating some number of those attacks, and that scales in an odd fashion whenever the game isn't linear. You're not getting a clear necessary pattern of there's going to be 3 attacks by level 15, there's 4 attacks by 20. It's going to be wonky and wiggly and vary game to game. At minimum, though, the numbers don't go up pretty quickly. They tend to stay low for a while. You're going to be capping at like 2d6 plus 3. Modifiers will be going up a little bit faster than the dice scaling does. So quantities of like 10 and 15 dice in the low to mid tier is about as good as it gets, because just how dice and attacks scale make the relevance of the hit points worth less as it goes multiplicatively up in specific monsters. It's messy and complicated, and definitely is going to vary DM.
Now, have you factored into that the cost of higher spell slots?
Yeah. So the really big redeeming factor here, in the mid-tier of play, if you're not using your highest level slot, I don't feel that bad about casting 8. If you have a 5th level slot and are sending a 4th level on this, I'm not that upset, because you still have access to all of the most powerful things you can do. I don't think you ever really want to spend your most powerful spell slot on this. Casting this as a 9th level spell, no, that's ridiculous. This isn't that powerful. Casting this as a 3rd level spell whenever you have 4th and 5th level slots, 10 extra hit points in that tier can be eating an attack or 2, and eating then over 3 creatures, 6 attacks or 2 equates to 2 or 3 actions that you're getting basically for a 3rd level spell slot, which is very good. Now, it's circumstantial. It doesn't always do that, but it is a preemptive measure that doesn't cost you any things in combat. So if you're playing a very combat-focused game around 1 to 2 big encounters, and you find you're not burning through all of your resources, 8 is kind of just free. If you're not already using all of your 2nd level slots, there isn't a really good reason to not just throw 5 hit points on 3 people. They aren't temporary hit points; they're maximum hit points. So you have some odd but more or less pointless interactions where you can get larger max heals with things like power word heal and garbage like that. That's not relevant. But it not being temporary hit points is. It means this does scale with things like False Life. It scales with things that are more common and you're going to see more commonly on some character sheets. False Life as a spell isn't great as far as casting it, but when you're a Warlock and you get it for free, it's a lot better. Whenever you're getting temporary hit points from things that are moderately decent, having aid also scale with them gives you a neat way to get more bolstered HP. I'm a fan of mechanics that don't overlap. Temporary hit points is something you get a fixed number of. You can't get more temp HP once you already have temp HP.
Yeah.
So having aid as subsequent HP on top of that, because it doesn't interact with temp HP at all, is cool. It helps that it's also not concentration. Hypothetically, you can spend 2 second level spell slots to get plus 10 HP, which isn't necessarily worse than using this as a third level spell slot. It isn't necessarily better than using it as a third level spell slot. It's just different. You still have access to your third level spells. You spend 2 second level spells and get the same effect. That's neat. This spell is very modal.
I didn't think about that. That's a measure of versatility that I hadn't considered.
Yeah. And the cost of this, especially as you get to the upper tiers, is very low. You're absolutely right. At least I think I'm sorry, you're not right. You're absolutely wrong. And saying that this is good at second level. This as a second level spell, when you get it at third level, I think is awful. I don't think you ever really want to be spending your highest level spell slots cast 8. Casting subsequent spell slots you don't either intend to use, find you're using infrequently, or have an abundance of that you don't necessarily need. It feels comfortable. It feels like an extra benefit that you just will have in the fight as an insurance policy that can net you a real advantage.
All right. Let me see. Do I have anything else to add there? Yeah. All right. Well, no, I don't have anything else.
Okay.
I'm
I'm
probably gonna cut some of this out. No. All right. Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. How about aid versus healing?
Aid is way better than healing. And I can explain why. Healing magic is yeah, it's what I'm here for, right? Healing magic is reactive in nature. If you want healing magic to be good, it has to be affecting the action economy. The healing at its best, in my opinion, is when you're getting things off of 0, because otherwise healing numbers aren't high enough on average to mitigate subsequent attacks. They need to be eating a lot of attacks to justify you using them, more than the actions you're putting into it, basically. Aid is a preemptive measure that lasts a very long time, it's going to functionally act as premeditative healing. This is something you've done before the fight to mitigate the actions that are spent on it, meaning you're spending 0 actions in combat and mitigating 1 to 4 to 8 actions, however many it takes to get through the aid. That in of itself is useful. That is powerful. That is extra turns the enemies have to spend killing you that you don't have to spend killing them. You're getting action advantage by using it preemptively. It being 8 hours too means this will mitigate things that will affect action economy. So like dungeons, for example, if you're going into a dungeon with 8 up, you taking damage in the dungeon, it impacts the action economy of a future encounter. It is the enemy's means of preemptive measures. It is how your DM is going to try and navigate an attack and encounter by reducing your hit points before you get into it. This mitigates some of that. So you're taking preemptive measures that work both against their preemptive measures and against their non-preemptive measures, against their actions they have to spend in combat. That in and of itself makes the preemptive kinds of prep spells like this that give you bonus HP useful. Healing magic outside of combat fills a similar role of mitigating preemptive damage, but it is so much worse in combat that you really don't want 5 extra healing of it. You don't want 10 extra healing because you're spending actions in combat to mitigate their actions in combat. You're spinning your wheels. Nothing exciting is happening. You're not meaningfully progressing the encounter towards an end. This means they have to spend more actions to reduce your actions, and you can then use those actions that they have to spend more of to reduce, killing them. You have a whole extra action to Guiding Bolt. You have a whole extra action to hit them with your mace. You have a whole extra turn to get a swing with your spiritual weapon and a swing with your hammer. All of it is upside. Preemptive measures way better than reactive ones. This is preemptive in all situations of it. Mitigates active and preemptive measures. It's great.
Okay, what about different kind of preemptive measure? What about aid versus mage armor?
So that is, I think, slightly different in that aid interacts with something that is going to tangibly be, it's sort of a constant. You know, in the fights, you're almost certainly going to be taking damage. Hypotheticals like mage armor, hypotheticals like granting disadvantage on attack rolls, they are attempting to change odds. So we're taking still both are going to statistically affect the outcome of an encounter. One, I think aid is a safer option to bet on than something like protection from good and evil, than something like mage armor. Increasing your AC is useful, undoubtedly. However, 5 temporary hit points will always reduce your incoming damage functionally. Hypothetically, there's a chance things just always roll to hit you and hit. 8 hours of aid versus the lower durations of things like mage armor also is 8 hours, but lower durations of other spells are going to make it so they're going to be good specifically in encounters sometimes and not always affect the fights. Aid will almost always affect the fights, and that's where I think it comfortably lands.
All right, cool. I think we've squeezed as much out of aid as we can.
Yeah, it's hard to compare it to a whole bunch of other things because it is a very unique effect. But I think this is a spell that really highlights good buff and utility spells that have a relatively low cost when you know when to use them.
All right, give it a Sam score.
I think it needs a 3 out of 5. I don't think you need it on every character sheet. It's definitely not warping the game in any meaningful way. It's a spell that you won't hate to have, and that you'll pick up at some point past 5th level, past 2nd level, or past 3rd level, where you're like, all right, I wish we were a little bit thicker. Aid will do that.
All right, everyone, that was aid. Thank you, Sam, and thank you, everyone, for watching. We will see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it. A gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description where you'll find my Caverns and Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, our full review of the spell, and other fun things.